First off, let's get through the main gimmick. Not only does this weapon have incredible throwing range, but it has the ability to bounce off of walls until it's reached that max range. Of course, this does give it more
didn't see there.
practicality
I was just
than
watching
point
some
center, since
old
it can go
videos,
farther
you know,
or
from
be used to
before
cover more
Splatoon 3
areas
came
by
out.
bouncing off the right walls. But I think it just being slightly better is an understatement. This is way more fun. I know a bunch of people
They're
are
pretty
already theorizing
cool.
all the different ways.
Angle shooter. I assume you've finished laughing. Do I even need to do a real intro? This thing has been shit since the game came out. There were a whole 2 people that got excited when their main got it on its second kit. I'd bring them on here, but one of them's dead and the other is stuck in the psych ward. You want an explanation? Here. The angle shooter is a small projectile that travels so fast, it's basically hit scan. It bounces off walls until it reaches its max travel distance, leaving a tripwire. If it hits an enemy, it will deal 40 damage and mark them. If an enemy touches the tripwire, they'll be marked but won't take damage. That's really it. And it's so bad. Let's talk about ricochets, a really uncommon mechanic in shooters because it's really hard to make work. At most, bombs bounce off walls. You see the sharpshooter here that I'm using? It was originally scrapped during development because it just took too much effort to make work in combat. And when it did come back, it has aim assists. This isn't a perfect ricochet, it adjusts itself because it takes way too long to line your shots up for a game like this. Even with aim assist, the sharpshooter is only really good in enclosed areas where it has a ceiling to bounce off of, because otherwise it just goes into the sky. You know what the best use for the sharpshooter is? Not a ricochet thing, just the fact that I can detonate enemy projectiles. Splatoon and Ultra Kill are different games, but the problem with ricochets are still here. It's hard to aim, and there's a chance it will just bounce out of the map. The only assist Splatoon has is that the bounces stick closer to the surfaces than they should. Keeping it closer to the ground increases the chance it will hit a player, but there's still a decent chance it will end up in an area that people just aren't going to use. Even if you do get it into an area people want to move in, the tripwire isn't that threatening. Here's a little secret. Being marked often isn't that big of a deal. Would I prefer that the enemy team doesn't essentially have wall hacks? Yes, but unless you're actively trying to hide, the mark isn't that big of a deal. Splatoon is a game where you usually have a general idea of where your enemies are. Frontliners are generally in front of the objective and usually aren't trying to hide themselves. Backliners try to hang out in specific areas that let them pressure the most space, often sticking to 1 or 2 spots. You know where the Brinewater Springs E-Leader is, there's not much of a question there. Players do try to sneak around, but it's not that common. So while being marked is a downside, depending on how you play, it often isn't that detrimental. And the only group that's actually threatened by it won't be found by Angle Shooter. Do you actually expect to find stealthy players with this thing? It's tiny! No one will just get caught in the crossfire of this thing because it's too small. To actually hit a player and mark them with an angle shooter, you need to already know where they are. Which just makes the location thing kind of pointless because the only players that would be affected by it won't be hit by it. This isn't a problem for point sensor because it's so massive you can just throw it at the corner. Bam! I know your every move, Buster. Point sensor is just so much better for location than angle shooter, and the only thing angle shooter really has against it is damage. Okay, let's talk about. Hey guys, this is my presentation on the angle shooter's damage. Now, if we see here, shit. Yeah, there's not much to say here, it's just not that much for how unlikely it is you'll hit someone with it. 40 damage does combo with a good bit of things in this game, but you know what else breaks a lot of thresholds in this game? If it's any consolation, it costs more. Honestly, has this thing ever been more than worse Burst Bomb? They did the same damage at one point, but I have to give it to you, Angle Shooter, you do 5 more damage. The most game-changing of buffs. Burst Bomb and Angle Shooter are both kinda the same role, quick damage in a fight. Burst Bomb is just better at that. It's significantly easier to use, and if you hit it direct, you do more damage than an Angle Shooter. Sure, Angle Shooter has more range, but can you really act on damage dealt that far away? The Angle Shooter has been nothing but a joke the entire game. It's stupidly hard to aim it, and it just ends up being less effective than everything else. The solution? I don't know, just fucking remove it in the next game.